My name is Nate, and I'm a pastor here, and it is truly a privilege and honor to be here with you. We've got some exciting things that have been going on, and I don't know if so Friday, we received in our Move Youth missions team that went to Kenosha, Wisconsin. Yeah. They had a life-changing experience, some amazing things. They came back better because of it, and Kenosha, Wisconsin is better because of it. And so it's a powerful thing to see. And I can also announce that our missions team that flew to the Dominican Republic, they arrived late last night, so they safely landed. Yeah, and can't wait to hear more of the stories of what's taken place over this week. Some incredible things that are going on. So here we go. We are in the second week of this series called Fish Stories. So fish stories is a phrase that is familiar to most of us. At least if you know a fisherman, you know what a fish story is, right? Some of you are probably fishermen out there, and I'm sure you've told your own fair share of fish stories. And, it's interesting. There's a couple times in the calendar year as a speaking pastor that when I feel like the message team decides that they really want to make me uncomfortable. And so we have series that I have no idea I've never really experienced this. We did a hunting series a couple years ago. I'm not a hunter. We're doing a fishing series. I'll be honest with you, I'm not a fisherman. Now, I've been fishing, and I've got my own fish stories, but I've never been the one like the actual one that got away from. I've always been the one that's been caught. Now, if you don't, basically what's taken place is that out of probably the couple handful of times I've ever been fishing, I haven't been doing the catching. Somebody has casted their hook, and it has landed firmly in me. Starting from when I was at a very young age. So I don't know if it's the trauma of the experiences as to why I don't find myself fishing, but I don't. But anyways, here we are. The whole purpose behind this series really is that within the pages of Scripture, you can read stories that have fish involved in it. And so we wanted to take those stories, some of those stories, and let's talk about those, what they mean to our lives. And so you're going to hear all kinds of stories, or all kinds of messages about the fish stories that you'll read within the pages of Scripture. You'll hear some very famous ones, the ones that you are you'll notice. And then you'll hear ones like today where you've probably never read this, maybe you've glossed over it and never seen it. But nonetheless, I believe it is something that will speak directly to our lives, it'll speak directly to our hearts, and cause us to take some steps that maybe we wouldn't normally take. And so, for me, the fish story that I'm sharing has nothing to do with fishing, but it has a little bit to do with fish. And so you'll go into the Old Testament and you'll open up the book of Ezekiel. Ezekiel is a prophet, an Old Testament prophet, that God spoke to and through to the people of the nation of Israel. He used Ezekiel to share truth that they needed to hear. And in this time frame, you'll find in Ezekiel chapter 47, I'm going to read one verse that shares the word fish in it, okay? And then I'll show you, I'm going to talk to you about what it means, because just reading into stuff, you're like, you just in the middle of a statement. So let me read it. Ezekiel 47:9 says this: swarms of living creatures will live wherever the river flows. There will be large numbers of fish. Here, right there. So we know, fish story. Large numbers of fish, because this water flows there and makes the salt water fresh. So where the river flows, everything will live. Now, that on itself, you're like, yeah, it makes sense. Where the river goes, there will be fish. Makes sense. But what we really need to gather from this is the context of where this comes from. See, Ezekiel is experiencing a vision from God. That God is showing him something. And in this vision, you can rewind 7 chapters to Ezekiel 40, where really this vision begins. And it begins with Ezekiel encounters a man who's in bronze in nature, not like really well tanned, but bronze, like angelically, I don't know. He just looks different. He's not a normal person. We believe it could be an angel that is actually leading Ezekiel around within this vision. And he's taking him around this beautiful place. It's a temple that looks much like a city. And he walks him through and is very detailed. At the beginning of it, in fact, the man says to Ezekiel, says, hey, listen, I'm going to show you a lot of things. And I want you to pay close attention because you need to go and share this with the nation of Israel. So pay close attention, he says. And he begins to go through these detailed instructions or directions or detail, just these incredible details with Ezekiel. And Ezekiel remembers them and puts them down, writes them down, and here we have this. But it leads up to Ezekiel chapter 47, where I think this is really where I want to get to. Ezekiel 47, chapter 1 says this, or verse 1 says this. The man brought me back, talking about the bronze man who's been acting as his tour guide, brought me back to the entrance of the temple. And I saw water coming out from under the threshold of the temple toward the east, for the temple faced east. The water was coming down from under the south side of the temple, south of the altar. He then brought me out through the north gate and led me around to the outside of the outer gate facing east, where the river is flowing. And the water, listen, this is important, was trickling from the south side. It was trickling through. So in this vision, the man has brought Ezekiel to this place where there's river flowing. And where's it flowing from? It's flowing from the temple, from the house of God. That's pouring out. Or it's not even pouring out, it's trickling out. But it continues to go on. As the man went went eastward with a measuring line in his hand, he measured off 1,000 cubits, and then led me around. Oh, I lost my spot. He measured off 1,000 cubits and then led me through the water that was ankle deep. So let's stop there for just a moment, because cubits is a measurement that we probably aren't familiar with. All right, so 1,000 cubits means really nothing to us, right? It just seems like it's probably a lot. So let me share with you. It's about half a kilometer, and so. That probably doesn't make sense either, does it? So it's in between a quarter and a third of a mile. So he takes out this measuring line, which is a really long measuring line, by the way, right? So he takes out this measuring line and he walks him out. He said, hey, come on. And he starts walking him through water. Quarter of a mile. You ever walk through water much? It's not the easiest thing to do. No, it takes a little bit out of you as you're doing it. So for me, ankle deep, it's probably not too bad, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to be exhausted walking through a quarter mile of ankle deep water. But it doesn't stop there. In fact, I don't know if the line is just continuous, but he must either gathered up the line or he has this line, and he continues to go on. As it says here, he measured off another 1,000 cubits and led me through the water that was knee deep. Then he measured off another 1,000 and led me through water that was waist deep. He then measured off another 1,000. By this point, we're well over a mile into this journey. He measured off another 1,000, but now it was a river that I could not cross, because the water had risen and was deep enough to swim in, a river that no one could cross. He then asked me, Son of man, do you see this? Then he led me back. He led me back to the bank of the river. When I arrived there, I saw a great number of trees on each side of the river. And he continues on into that verse 9 where he talks about the river flowing and the fish were teeming and there was living things in this. And it flowed out into the salt water and cleaned it to where everything could live and flourish. And so we read through this, and you may, upon hearing this, go, oh, what is this? Okay. What does this have to do with me? What I believe that we're reading here, what I believe that we're seeing here, is we're seeing of this vision is a view of the process of faith in our lives. Of what processing through faith, going through and experiencing and living out our faith in our life. This is really what it looks like. This is what it should look like. And you see this is what I believe that this is it's a process, because Well, he starts him at the very shallow waters and takes him well over a mile within water, walking through water, to a place where he couldn't even swim in it. He could not cross. And so what I see here, what I'm beginning to see here is I believe what we see is what the Lord is showing us is that there is a process in our faith that should take us to a place, well, that should move us. And so I think there's different phases that we see as we look through this vision of what it looks like to process through our faith. The first phase that I see here is that ankle deep. It's the stepping into those waters, to the river of life. It's stepping into those places and beginning to walk through. This phase that we see that Ezekiel is experiencing, that we all experience at some point in our life, is the very beginnings of our faith. It's fun. It takes a little bit of a step, as a kid, or maybe as a parent, you've seen your kids as they have their first encounters with water. Typically, it's a little hesitant because there's a little insecurity because you're not sure what's on the other side unless you got a crazy kid like I do who just jumps in the pool and you're like, you gotta pull them out, save them. But there's this place where you can play in it. It's security there. It's really nice because you know what? I can get in and out. It's easy. I'm just right here. I'm at the shoreline. It's nice and shallow. I can play around. I get out of here. This is where the kids are. This is where they're hanging out and playing. I can turn and look another way because my kid's it's not deep enough water. They're going to get hurt. But this is a safe place there in this first phase. Then we see the second phase that Ezekiel is now walking through. This second phase is now knee deep. Now this takes a little bit more trust. It didn't tell us what the clarity of the water, right? Right. For myself, my wife is not a fan of natural bodies of water, especially the ones where she can't see her feet. Right. That first phase seems really nice because you can see your feet because it's not just at my ankles. I can see what's going on down here. I can see there's no fish here. But as soon as you get to knee deep, that takes a little bit more trust because you're going to step in, and I can't necessarily see what's below me. But what I know is that because the water is deepening, there is life there. There's something more happening. It's broadening, it's deepening, it's widening. You can start to see the things that are connected to this body of water. They're starting to you're seeing life around it. You get into the third phase of it, where now it's waist deep. This waist deep adventure and journey in faith is, well, I still have a little bit of security. I still have control a little bit. But every once in a while, that current, if you've ever been kind of waist deep into, that current can pick up a little bit and move you, right? You lose a little bit of that, right? There's a little bit of that takes place, but yet you still have some control here. Then you get into that fourth phase. The fourth phase that we see Ezekiel going through. It's no longer a creek. It's no longer a trickle or a creek or just an ordinary river. Now we're talking about a mighty river with a current that he's struggling to even swim. In fact, the man has to pull him back. He pulls him back to the shoreline because it is overwhelming. It is taking control of him. If you've ever swam or been in a river that's got a strong current, you understand what we're talking about here. I myself, as a young kid, I grew up just blocks from the convergence of the Angola River and the Maumee River. Now, it's not a gigantic river, but that river had a current to it. And as young kids, we were probably, 10, 11, 12 years old, a group of us, 3 of us decided, you know what? There's an island in the middle of this river. Never seen what's on this island. I want to see what's on this island. So we get an inflatable raft and a couple paddles, and we go, we're going to go see what's on that island. We pushed off and realized we're not going to see what's on that island because the current was much stronger than what we could paddle. And it was going to take us in a direction that we don't know where we're going to end up. Had an idea that we're probably going to end up over the dam, which is not a good place to be. So we had to make a decision. We decided, you know what? This isn't worth the effort or trying to get out there because we're not going to make it. We need to get out now. So we all bailed out because it wasn't going to be one of us that was going to pull us to shore. It was going to take all of us to get back over there. And we got back out and we made a promise that we will never do that again. Because the force of that river with the current, we had lost control. It was no longer in my control that I was going to get to where I wanted to get to. It was going to take me where it wanted to take me. And we see this also in the beauty of this progression that we see within this river. And we see it in our natural surroundings as well. You know, the Mississippi River right here in the United States, one of the mightiest rivers in all the world, it starts out as a trickle almost. At its very beginning, the Mississippi River is no wider than 20 feet. You can walk through that bad boy. It's probably ankle deep. Not much to write home about. But at its widest, it is 11 miles wide long. And it is a mighty river that moves things. It moves things. 11 miles wide. And what's beautiful about what we see the difference in this, because we see this Mississippi River, and where it starts there, and then it just gets wider. And the crazy part about that is the only way that Mississippi River is the size and has the force and the power that it has is because of all the tributaries that feed into it. All these other things around, all these rivers and bodies of waters that feed into this are feeding it and making it stronger and bigger and mightier. And when we look at the comparison of this mighty river that we have within the United States and the river that Ezekiel is being shown by God himself and being led into, the difference is their only source, that the river that we see Ezekiel wading into, comes from the temple of God. It comes from God himself. That is the only source that's receiving. The power all comes from this. So let's take a moment. I want to stop for a moment. I want us to hear the words of Jesus, because when we think about what this looks like, what this is, Jesus speaks about this. He shares this. In fact, you can read it in John chapter 7, verse 37. It says this: "On the last and greatest day of the festival, Jesus stood and said in a loud voice to everyone, 'Let anyone who is thirsty come to me and drink. Whoever believes in me, as the scripture has said, livers of living water.'" Okay, let's start back there. Man, I was on a roll too. "Whoever believes in me, as scripture has said, rivers of living water will flow within them." What Jesus is saying in this is that there's no other tributaries that are going to feed into you that's going to feed you the way that I'm going to feed you. That I'm the source. That the source is going to flow through me, and it provides healing, it provides purpose, and it provides direction. You aren't going to get that from the other things in your life. He continues on, actually, and he's talking to, we see it in John chapter 4, where Jesus encounters the Samaritan woman who's by a well, who's getting there to get water. He encounters her and he says this to her. He says, Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water," speaking of the water that's within that well, "whoever drinks this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks the water that I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." When Jesus is speaking to this woman, he already knows her. He knows everything about her. He knows her history. He knows her present, and he knows where he wants her to go. He already knows all of this, and he spoke directly to her about her thirst, her desire to have something that's going to fill her, that's going to bring satisfaction to her, that was going to fulfill a desire, a need that she has in her life. And he spoke directly to that, and knowing that he is the one that has the living water, he shares that with her, the one that there's nothing else that can quench the way that this does. He realized that he shared with her that there's not any other way. There's not another way that you're going to quench the thirst the way that I can quench your thirst. It's not going to be another relationship. It's not going to be anything else that's going to fulfill the need and the desire that you have the way that I can, the way that I will. I will provide all that you need. All that you need. So when we stop, if we stop and we look at all the things that feed into our lives, all the tributaries, because we all have these things, right? We have sources We have other sources that feed into our lives that we believe that brings life to us, that brings satisfaction, that fulfills desires, maybe even some needs. We have those things, whether it's a career or whether it's a hobby or whether it's whatever it may be. We have things in our life that when we have those things, it fills something with us. It makes us feel good. But the problem is it doesn't sustain. Because all we need is more and more and more to fill that. The Mississippi River becomes mighty because it's not just one tributary that's feeding into it. It's one after another, after another, after another, after another, after another, after another. And that's what it looks like in our life. The one thing, the one drink will not be enough. The one high will not be enough. The one sexual encounter will not be enough. The one relationship will not be enough. It's never going to be enough of these things that we believe are going to bring life to us. But the reality is it will not be enough. There's only one source that will be enough. And Jesus is saying right there that I am that source. I am that source. And what he begins to share with her is that something amazing takes place. When we recognize that, when we drink of that living water that he is offering, when we allow him into our life and he would be the source, the supply that we need, when we allow him into that place, it takes us to a place where something beautiful happens, something amazing happens. He says this in John 4, verse 23 says this, "Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in the Spirit and in truth." What he is stating to this woman is that what people will experience when they take in the rivers, the living water, when that becomes their supply and their source, what will come out of them will be worship. True worship. Not false worship, but a very true worship of the one and true living God, one of spirit and of truth. And that sounds like a place that we would like to be, where that everything that we do, everything that's coming out of us is now an act of worship. It's not a Sunday morning. It's not a song. It's not simply a prayer. It's all of those things. It's our lives being lived out, that becomes the act of worship, is ourselves, is what we bring to the table. I don't know about you, but that's where I want to be. Am I there? No. But what I see from this vision that God has given Ezekiel, is that this is a lifelong process. That this is something that takes time. That it just doesn't just happen. So the question we need to answer is, how do we get there? How do we get to that place where this is what my life begins to look like? Well, the first place that we have to get to, the first thing that we need to be able to do is we've got to get in. We got to see the waters, the living water for what it is, and we need to step into it. We need to take that first act of faith and step into it. Because the reality is that too often in our lives, we're sitting on the shoreline. We're watching this take place. But we need to get in. We need to take that first step of faith, is to step into the waters, to play around, to see, just to be there, to see where it takes you. That's a big step of faith in many of our lives. That's a first great step, but it is a minor step that we need to take that could forever change, just to see what God is willing to do, wants to do through your life. Now understand, listen, this is a process. Because here's the truth of it. The last thing I want my 5-year-old son to do is go jump into the deep end, into the that deep end of the mighty river off the shoreline. Big old cannonball. Woo! Because what's going to happen? He's going to be overwhelmed. He's not ready to jump into that. He needs to get into the shallow end and get comfortable in those waters. To begin that journey, to get in and begin to wade into this. Because I'm telling you, when we see that, which leads to our next stop, our next place that we need, the next thing that we need to be willing to do would be this, is that while we're in there, while we wade into these waters, while we step into them, we begin to notice what God's doing. Begin to see what's taking place. With those little steps, that step of faith, see what God does with it. See what he's doing around you. Notice it. See, many times in our life, we step in and we don't pay attention to what God's doing. We say, this is what I'm going to follow Jesus. And then we sit down in those waters. And we don't watch what he does. We don't notice what he's already doing. We don't notice. Because here's the thing that I can promise you. If you truly step into the waters that he's offering you, you will see change. You will see him doing something. If you pay attention, if you are really pursuing after that, you will see him do something in you and around you that you can't do. And what it will do, it should cause you to get a little bit more comfortable, to step a little bit further, to take another step. Notice that God, because what he does, I'm telling you, what he does is noticeable if we choose to look for it. If we choose to look for it, we'll see that he does. He does revive. He revives people. He revives relationships. He revives circumstances. He revives. That's what he does. He restores. Not only does he revive, but he restores. He strengthens. He makes better on the other side of it. He reveals. He reveals purposes and plans and direction. He reveals his goodness, his faithfulness. He reveals these things when we step into those waters. And we allow and we pay attention, we will see what he does. And it will cause us to do what we need to be doing, which is to wade in deeper. We don't stop in that shallow end and sit down and play around. Many times that's what we do with our life. Yes, Jesus, I'm in. I'm not going to sit down. I can't get back up. Would have wore different pants, planned that out better. But too often we just sit down. And the reality of it is that we can't go, we're not going to go anywhere if we're sitting anywhere. If you're in shallow water and you sit down, what does it do? Nothing. It doesn't move you anywhere. You just sit there. But the more that you wade in deeper, the more it moves you. The more it picks you up and moves you another step. It's easier, it gets a little bit easier the deeper that you go to take the next step. To the point where you get to a deep place where you're not the one moving you. He is. He's the one that's moving you. He's taking you to places that you don't know where you're going. And sometimes we get into those deep waters. This is another thing of why it's a lifelong process, because sometimes we get in those deep waters, we're like, hey, I don't like this. And we got to swim against the current. That's where it gets hard, friends. That's where this journey gets really, really hard, is when we get into a place where we're overwhelmed and we try to swim against the current. That's a very, very difficult thing to do. But we are meant to wade in deeper. I don't think this is a coincidence that Ezekiel will be shown this vision, that this would be shared, that thousands of years later we can look at this and go, okay, so what do we do with it? Was this a random story? This is not a random story. This is a vision of what it looks like to walk in faith with Jesus. This is what it looks like, that it starts somewhere, but it has to go somewhere too. That you step into those shallow waters and you begin to walk into deeper and deeper waters still. And the more that you take those steps, the more confident you get in the steps to come. So last year was the first time I've ever really spent any time at the ocean. It was the second time ever that I had put my feet into the waters of the ocean. And in that moment, I remember walking up to it and being overwhelmed, like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. And so all I could muster up for myself was to get about calf deep. And it was enough for me. The water was cool and refreshing, but yet it was still overwhelming to me. So we enjoyed ourselves. The kids enjoyed themselves, so we came back the next year. And I was able to wade in even deeper. Yeah, right? And I'm 42 years old, and I'm pumping my fist about going about belly deep in the waters, the ocean waters. But that's what this is. This whole thing is a process. It's a journey. And it takes small acts of faith to realize that there's bigger acts of faith. It has to start somewhere. It starts with stepping into the waters, but it doesn't end there. It continues on with another step, because guess what? It doesn't matter where you are in your life right now. It doesn't matter who you are, how long you've been following after Jesus. Guess what? There's a next step. There's a next step. There's a next step into deeper waters with him. He guarantees that. He offers that for us. We haven't made it. None of us have made it. But he is offering something greater for us if we are willing to take that next step. And it takes a single step of faith. I don't know what that is for you. I can only know what it is for me. For you, it may be just that simple, the first step of faith of saying yes to Jesus. And saying, you know what, church isn't enough. One day a week is not enough. That I'm going to start living this on a day-to-day basis. That is my step of faith. Maybe for you, maybe it's something more than, maybe it's giving of yourself in that. Surrendering a little bit more. Because when you look at that, that's what it is. The deeper you go, the more surrendered you are to it. And you're giving up more and more of yourself so that he can do something with you. I don't know what that looks like for you. For you, it may be, maybe I need to give. Maybe I need to give to those that are around me. Maybe I need to actually pull out my wallet and do something with what I've got stored in there. I need to trust God that he's going to do something greater with this. Maybe for you, I need to start serving people because my life has been all about me. That next step that I need it needs to be about somebody else. So maybe it needs to be in your home. It starts right there in your home and those who are around you. Serving them, doing things that they're not expecting you to do. Nor do they necessarily deserve it. But yet you do it because you love them and you have been loved in a far greater way than what you could ever love. And so you take those steps of faith to serve those around you. Serve your community, serve your church. Serve somewhere, it might be there. I don't know what it is. But if you look deep enough, you'll know what it is. You know what that piece is that's little, I don't know what that step's going to take me. But I'm telling you, the more that you wade in, the freer you become. The more that you surrender of yourself and the control that you have in your life, the freer you become. The deeper you go into waters, the less weight and pressure that's on your shoulders. He's the one that offers exactly what we need, the freedom that we need in our lives. But it takes us taking those steps. And it's worth it. It's oh so worth it. And the last thing I want you to do is go, well, Nate said this is what I need to do, so this is what I'm going to do. Because that's not good enough. I want you to find out for yourself. I want you to pursue after that. I want you to share what God is doing. Whether it means to get in, whether you need to start just looking around and notice what he's doing, or whether you need to take that next deeper step. Pay attention, because he will fulfill those promises. That when you trust him, he will lift you up. Let's pray.